Fire Chief Ed Elliott began his career as a firefighter in Deep Creek. No one could have imagined the impact he would make on the Chesapeake community for nearly 50 years. As he moved up through the ranks, he encountered just about every type of emergency that a firefighter must be prepared for, from large-scale building fires, tornado touchdowns, hurricanes, and acts of violence. His impact reaches well outside Chesapeake's borders, thanks to his contributions to mutual aid efforts with our neighboring cities, and even his contributions to emergency responses across the country, such as with Hurricane Katrina and 9/11. He has watched over the city as it has grown and flourished, and he has dedicated his life to serving and leading, and now he prepares for a well-deserved retirement. Chief Ed Elliott, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I gotta ask it.
Okay.
You're getting ready to retire after 49 and a half years?
Yes.
You couldn't go to 50?
I could have. Yes, I could have.
What made now the right time for retirement?
That's probably the most common question I have been asked.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. I never realized there are so many OCD people in the city. It's like, why couldn't you make it? And the answer is I could, but personally, I never had a number of years that I was trying to reach. I never had tenure time, never had an age. So for me, it was just reading the seasons personally and professionally, and you just sense when the seasons are changing and it's time for your next chapter in life. And so that's where I was at. I did have, a pretty large amount of some bucket list items that I really wanted to see accomplished, before I retired under my administration. And as those, bucket list items, started to decrease, I found myself lifting the lid and putting one more thing in there. But I just finally drew a line in the sand, and there was really one last bucket item, and I really wanted to see that, on the tracks and down the road. And once that was done, you just know in your heart that your work here is finished. It's time to move on. And so that's what I did. But it was never about reaching 50 years.
Fine. We're all just going to say 50, though. Can we just agree to that? We're just going to round up.
We can. It's close enough.
It's close enough.
We can round up. And I always say, and you were there with us too, but I think anybody that worked through the 2 years of COVID ought to get double service anyway. So let's just say I've got 51.
I love
because
it.
we went through that, and that was a lot of work.
Yes. It sure was. Yeah. You mentioned your bucket list items. I got to know, what was that last one?
The last one was breaking ground on Fire Station number 8 in Deep Creek. That was the station. I grew up in Deep Creek. I still live in Deep Creek, and that was the fire station that I walked in as an 18-year-old recruit firefighter. And as time goes on and we do station replacement, Station 8, came along. And because of the budget and things like that, they had to rebid, and that prolonged literally, my retirement plans, because I really wanted to see that station, at least the groundbreaking. I won't be here for the ribbon cutting, but I wanted to see the groundbreaking for that new fire station, for the community. And I wouldn't say that was a selfish thing, but it was a personal thing, so that this is where you started, and you're leaving it better than you found it. More of a symbolic thing for the Deep Creek community.
Well, let's go back to Deep Creek, 1974.
That's a long way.
Little young Ed Elliott, ready to go.
Yes.
What made you make that decision to go into firefighting?
I didn't really make that decision. That was not my career choice. And coming out of high school, we all have different dreams. My dream throughout high school, I was really heavy into motocross, motorcycle racing and motocross, and working in that profession. I had went to professional trade school for that. And so coming out of high school, that was my 18-year-old dream. It didn't take long out of high school to realize I would starve to death with that dream.
Yes.
And so that quickly became not my career choice, but more of a hobby. So my second career choice really had always been law enforcement, in particular forensics. And so, after less than a year out of high school, I said, I think I better pursue that law enforcement type. And so that was my career goal. And at the time, there was only a couple of departments that would hire 18-year-olds into law enforcement. Chesapeake, unfortunately, was not one of those. And so as I was heading in that direction, I actually got some advice from my brother-in-law said, if you want to do that and you want to do it in Chesapeake, why don't you just go into the fire department and get your 3 years in, and then you can do a lateral transfer. It was a Department of Public Safety then. It wasn't two different departments. It was two divisions of the same department.
Okay.
You can get your 3 years in, and when you turn 21, you can do a lateral. And then when you go into the police department, you already have a couple of years of seniority. Sounded like a good plan. And so that's how I got into the fire service, kind of accidentally. But as time went on, it was pretty obvious that the fire service was on the brink of really doing big things and changing. And I realized, when I reached that 21, 22 year mark, I was going to have to make another career choice. And it was I going with the original plan, or was I going to stay in the fire service?
Well, we're glad you did. I think you made the right choice back then. You guys obviously have such serious stuff to work with. You guys have to be ready to go at a moment's notice. But in my experience with the fire department, you guys also know how to have some fun.
We do.
What are some of your favorite memories from those early years before you got all of this, pressure on your shoulders to be the leader? Do you have any memories that stick out to you as something fun?
Yeah, I have a lot of memories. I'm still employed, so I can't share all of them.
Fair enough.
Okay, so
Fair enough.
Maybe after retirement, I can share some of the other memories.
We'll bring it back for the real stuff.
I think when you look back, the camaraderie that we have in the station, and it's such a different culture in the firehouse. People don't understand it unless you've lived through it. But when you have a crew that literally lives together for 24 hours, we do a lot of stuff together. We see a lot of stuff, and we come back. And part of that is our own internal healing process from the things that we experience and things we see. And some people call it dark humor. It's not always that, but it's just a firehouse culture that, in addition, to coming to work and doing a good job and serving the people, let's have fun while we do it. And that's all part of that. And some of it is playing tricks on each other. And we would do a lot of that, especially, as young firefighters in the station house. And sometimes it's just simple stuff. You would adjust the slats on somebody's bed when they're out on a call at night. So when they came back all tired and ready to hit the bed, they did, and everything dropped to the floor, and you could hear the whole place break out in laughter. And we just knew how to have fun, and we still do. And a lot of that bleeds over to off duty as well.
You talk about that need to have the mix of humor and seriousness. Firefighters, police officers, EMS, you all see things that the normal public, the regular Joe, could potentially be quite traumatized from. Sure. How do you deal with maintaining that mental and emotional stability when the stuff that you guys have to handle is so heavy?
Well, fortunately, in the fire service, probably the last 8 or 10 years, we have put a focus on that, because the generation that I came in, and really the words were "suck it up, Buttercup," and if you can't take it, you need to find another job. And it would give you a false sense of being tough, knowing that every call that you went on had a traumatic effect, on you. We see things in the field. Our folks see things. You cannot unsee them after you see them, and it goes from children, dealing with infants, dealing with children, dealing with the elderly, everything in between, and we see the worst of the worst. And so in those days, you just kind of stuffed it. You didn't talk about it. You didn't show weakness because it was seen as a weakness. And if it did impact you, it was seen as a stigma that you really didn't want to share it. And so in our industry, both on the law enforcement side as well on the fire service side, we've learned that it's okay. I mean, we're people, we're human beings, and as we go out and see that, it impacts us too. And we need to do much better than we've done in the past with behavioral health care and prevention and wellness. And we have done that. And so, we have worked hard to break that stigma. When you come back, we need to decompress. We need to debrief. And if that's not enough, we need to take another, the next action, whatever that is, because what we've learned is that has an accumulative effect on us. It's not just the average person seeing something and that's the only time they'll see it. Some of our folks will see it 3 or 4 times in one 24-hour shift, and that you cannot decompress that much trauma in a short period of time. So we've done a great job. We have peer support team that comes out, and we built an internal culture. We talked about the culture of having fun, but one of the things that we've focused on the last 4 or 5 years or so is creating an internal culture where we check on one another, because nobody knows better if you're off balance than the person that's with you 24 hours a day. And so when we come on duty, how you doing today? How you doing? We check up. How'd your 5-day break go? When you come back after that call, our folks are aware. Let's look after each other, because we see the signs in the station, the firehouse, before other people would, especially the quiet people. They'll sit back and they're hurting on the inside. And so, we've trained our officers as part of their leadership. Keep your pulse on all your people all the time, and if anything doesn't look right, or if there's a little bit change in character or something, let's follow up on it.
Yeah, that really speaks to the culture that under your leadership in particular has been able to grow and evolve. And from the small experiences I've had with your folks, it's very evident that that's the culture that exists there. So I'm very, very proud that is the way it is here in Chesapeake. Chesapeake is a very unique community, right? Incredibly diverse. We've got waterfront, we've got agriculture, high rises, residential, industry. How in the world does one fire department prepare itself to respond to emergencies in all of these different types of areas? Different types of hazards. How do you do that?
It is, and for us, we see it more as an opportunity. It's definitely a challenge. But not every place can you go to a barn fire, in the morning and then go do a mid-rise in the afternoon,
right,
or later on that night. And so when you look at Greenbrier and Summit Point, that's going up in the sky, and then we're preserving, our agriculture and our rural areas. We still have that. We don't do as much now, but when I came in, the Dismal Swamp was part of our, and so we were dealing with wildland fires back then. And now federal government does most of that unless they need our assistance on that. But we still have quite a few brush fires. So, where else with 353 square miles can you get it all? And I think what it's done is, as our folks transfer around, they become well-rounded firefighters in every aspect. That they can go down to the southern part of the city. We fight fire differently down there because there are no city hydrants and water supply. And so they have to learn tankers, tanker supply. We have water task force, and they have to learn how to, do, relay shuttling. We have dry hydrants that are down there that are connected to, like some of the ponds. And so it's a different type of firefighting down south. Most people don't realize that. And the challenge is there's still a lot of construction and development going on down south ahead of, the future infrastructure of water supply. So we have to take that rural firefighting and then apply it to residential in some of those areas.
Right.
But at the end of the day, our firefighters are so well-rounded because they know high-rise, they know rural fire attack, they know residential. And then you look at the commercial side of it, and I was just looking at one that we had this weekend. There's a lot of potential just in our business side of the commercial and the industry that we have. And again, you mentioned the waterfront.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about shipboard firefighting, that is a whole different universe of firefighting, of fighting fire on board a ship as opposed to inside of what we call structural firefighting.
Yes, I'm sure. And you talk a lot about the different types of equipment that you use. And there really is such a wide variety, and you've done such a good job in making sure that our fire department kind of stays on the front of all of this new technology. How have you seen this technology, the industry as a whole, change throughout your nearly 50 years? Does anything stand out? Because there have been a lot of changes.
Yes, it's been a world of changes, and we could probably spend 8 hours just talking on the changes.
Great, let's do it.
So I'm trying to think, what really stands out, and I think maybe what stands out from the the tangible things, not so much the human side of things, is probably technology has changed communications and technology.
Yeah.
When I first started, we had one portable radio for the station. One big, it was a brick with a big antenna on it, and that was the only portable communication that we had. So when we went to a structural fire, we went interior. You didn't carry the radio because it's too big and bulky with the antenna, so it stayed on the engine. So you went into structural firefight with no communications to the outside. So the communications has changed. Everyone has their portable radio on the communication side. On the technology side, I can remember when the department, I can vividly remember when the department got its first computer. Its very first computer, and it was for data entry, for information. And it was in fire headquarters, and we did all the reports, and then there was a data entry clerk that would take the reports, and it was just one computer.
Wow.
And then that expanded so that each battalion chief office, and I was a battalion chief at the time, each battalion chief office got a computer for the battalion. And the stations didn't have them, and there was just one for the battalion, and the reports would come in there, and that's how we got into that. And so now, we sit here, coming up on, the end of 2023, and what I carry on my belt, what we all carry with the smartphone right here, has so much more, technological power in that one phone than we would ever have imagined in my career. And I remember going to, it was kind of a futuristic thing with Chief Best when he was the fire chief and I was the deputy, and we went to a technology conference. And at that time, we would carry pagers, and then we had a great big old cell phone, that we would carry. And then you would also carry, your fire department radio, your communication radio. And so you were loaded down, you look like Batman with all these things when you went out. And we went to, I can remember, we went to a conference and they were showing us, what was coming in the future. And I remember in one of the sessions, they said, there's a day coming sooner than you think where all of your communications, all of your text, all of your telephone, and then they said, and all of your email was going to be on one device, and it's smaller than anything you're carrying now. And we're like, there's no way. There's no way, especially email. And so now when I pull this off, if I want to talk to our dispatcher or if I want to listen to a fire in progress and talk to them, there is an app for that. And I press that app, and we can literally just go right in, patch right into our communication system off of a smartphone. So that, the technology, and that bleeds over into our mapping, of how we map and how we pre-plan. All of that is done, with GIS now. We have automatic vehicle locators. And as we were coming up, we had to hand draw the maps of our entire districts.
Oh my gosh.
And they were huge. We called them mud flap map books because they were so big that the covers could be mud flaps on the back of the engine.
Wow.
And as you were responding to a fire, now most of us had memorized our street. That was part of being released as a driver operator, is to memorize all the streets in your district. But if you were responding into somebody else's, or you wanted to see the location of the hydrant, en route, the officer had to open this great big huge map book, and you would be telling the driver, two streets up, you need to turn right. There's going to be a hydrant, one hydrant before the house, one hydrant after the house. And so we would be working on the fire from the map book en route. And so now with the technology they have the tablet right there in the engine when they get in. it's all there for them, and then they can switch over to the pre-plan. So they can see the building before they ever leave the station, and as they're en route, they can know on the pre-plan, what does the building look like, where's the gas shut off, where are the hazards.
Wow.
And so
So
all
the
that.
speed that you're able to respond
Yes.
has really increased. I
And the
imagine.
AVL, which is something that we really had been pushing for a long time, and a lot of the technology takes a while to get everything lined up.
Sure.
But that AVL system, automatic vehicle locator, has been a game changer for us, because in the past it was the closest station, and you would send that equipment from the station, and if they were out, you would send the next one. It was all prescribed. It was automatic, but when AVL come online a year or so ago, what that does is use the signal, the GPS signal, and when that call comes in, it will tell the dispatcher, this is the closest unit for that type of call.
Wow.
And so if we have a truck that happens to be going to the city garage, or happens to be coming back from the city garage, or happens to be coming back, a medic unit happens to be coming back from a call, whereas in the past, they would dispatch to the closest station. Now that medic unit literally could be a block or two away.
Wow.
We would have never known that before, but now that medic unit will get the call because it's the closest unit, and then everything will fall in behind that. It's been a game changer for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Technology, major changes, but also sort of the idea of emergency management as its own thing. It is not that was not the case when you first started, right? Emergency management being
not at all.
Okay.
And that was one of the four thoughts that I had. You were asking me about changes.
Yeah.
The technology just stands out because it's so much of it, and it comes so fast. The other thing that we have experienced in the fire department, because we inherited emergency management some years ago, and when they first started, emergency management was almost like a byword in the old Office of Civil Defense. And so when you go back to the early history of the city, there was an Office of Civil Defense. And it was so small, it was one person, and it had basically, the big thing they did was kind of communications, and there was not a lot of technology, but whatever technology was there, they did that. And then, by the way, there's this thing that's being mandated by the state of emergency management, and that was a good place, to kind of tuck that away. And then, so what happened, in the city's growth and evolving as we've done, is when that little department was, eliminated, then everybody got a little piece of the pie that was in there. And so, police department got communications, and somebody else got something else. And then, we found out you're going to get emergency management. Now, I'll take you back to our emergency management plan, because I had it memorized as a firefighter and a fire officer.
Oh, wow.
Is that when a hurricane was coming, our hurricane preparedness plan was basically make sure you got the garbage cans inside the building so they wouldn't blow away, secure all your furniture, make sure all the gas tanks were topped off, including the boat, and then make sure all your portable radios, which was typically one, was charged, fully charged. It was those three things were the hurricane preparedness plan.
It's gotten a little more complicated.
It has. So when we inherited emergency management, it was literally a couple of 3-ring binders that came from the state at the time. It was Department of Emergency Management, and that was it. We just got those binders and put them on a shelf. And we inherited emergency management, and it went into fire prevention. And I don't know why it just did. It didn't matter, because we didn't do anything with it much. And the binder sat on the shelf so that we could comply. And then, as time evolved, there were people that got interested in it. There were things that you had to do. And then as you did those things and learned about it, people got interested. And then again with Chief Best, when he was here, again, mandated the fire chief. Somebody in the city had to be the coordinator of emergency management. That was mandated. Most places that ended up being the fire chief. And so when Chief Best got that, as it began to evolve, it became a lot more than one position. And so we got our first deputy coordinator of emergency management. And, with a couple of people, she was full-time, but with a couple of people that, supported that, that little thing began to grow. And again, you could look at it and tell emergency management was becoming its own discipline. It was bigger than law enforcement. It was bigger than just, having a collateral duty, bigger than the fire service. Is that you could see this was going to grow into its own discipline. And as we sit here today, you've been in our EOC, it is when something happens, and whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a no-notice active threat, that we have to deal with. When we flip the switch in emergency management, it's all about, first of all, being prepared for it. That's not the time to be prepared. And so a lot of emergency management now is just prepared, preparing ourselves. And the second part of that preparedness is the training part. And then you have the response part. And then, after it's over, somebody's got to pick up the pieces and recover and get the city back to normalcy. And so emergency management does that. And, I sit here today knowing, I know firsthand, I was there when the first couple of binders went on a bookshelf and said, okay, you guys have emergency management. And then I've been there in that emergency operations center in the worst times that the city has faced, and watched the operations unfold and how well prepared we are. Yeah. It is just a huge transition just in that world of emergency management.
Yeah. You're absolutely right that preparedness is so important, and now it kind of seems like, of course, we have plans, we have emergency management, but that really does again speak to the growth underneath your leadership, and that we have been able to and have been prepared to respond to the things that we know are coming. The hurricanes, Floyd, Isabel, those were big deals for our city, and we responded. But also sort of the things that up until recently really weren't something that one would have thought of. Somehow you and your team thought about it. The pandemic is a big one when that came down the pike, and you were able to be, oh, by the way, we have a plan for that. Who has a plan for a pandemic? Now it sounds obvious, but we were sort of always ahead of the game. Then, of course, last year, going through the mass shooting at Walmart, we had a plan for that. And so it's sort of like we need your team to think of all these awful things that could happen, and how can we respond to that? So that, I think that's really a benefit to everything that's happened underneath your leadership. All the stuff you've been through, all the progress we've made, let's look forward. Other than, I don't know, maybe improving your golf game or whatever you're going to be doing in retirement, do you have a vision for what you hope the next decade or so will look like for the Chesapeake Fire Department?
I do have a vision for that, and part of that is our succession management plan, and that has not been by accident. And we have worked on that for literally decades. We spot rising stars. We fuel the talent at every level. We begin our leadership training in the Recruit Academy. They learn how to become leaders while they're recruits. And then we have an officer development program. We have mentorship, for leaders. And we really push education and development of leadership. And one of our core values is that we push leadership over management. Because management, really, you can come in and manage things, but that doesn't mean you're actually going to move the ball anywhere. You're just going to manage status quo, which some people need to do that. But leadership is really a visionary leader gets a vision, and then through leadership moves the team along and moves the department along. And that is everybody's job. Every leader, informal, formal rank, is that everybody pulls on the same rope with whether it's strategic plan. We just did the master training plan for next year. I was looking at that, and so we have developed leaders all through the rank. And part of that is preparing them for that next step in their career. And part of good leadership is really, it's a responsibility to throw the rope back, to teach those that are behind you, prepare them. And there should never be a vacuum in any organization, but in our department, we have made it deliberate, is that there is an absolute rock solid succession management plan that's, 1 or 2 deep on the bench. And so, I see a seamless transition, not only a transition, but an upward trend, because as my generation moves on, there's another generation, and they're going to come in, and the wow that I had when they were talking about a smartphone or one device, this generation, they're wowed with something else. We're going to do this. We're going to roll our sleeves up, and we're going to do this. We're going to do this, and they've got their ideas, and now it's their turn at bat. And so I leave here, one, knowing that the department is in absolute good hands, and that's important to me after investing this much time. I know this department is in good hands, but also know that they're going to do better than I did because it's their generation and it's their turn to move it. And I know that this department, the trend is going to continue upward, and it's only going to get better. And so as a resident of the city, I feel good about that.
There you go.
Yeah.
What are you going to miss most?
It's been bittersweet. We talk a lot about the fire department family that we built, and a lot of our emphasis on duty, off duty, are part of our culture. That's unique to the CFD, is that we take care of one another in times of need. Fundraisers, when somebody hurts, we all hurt. We all go to the cause. And we really have built a fire department family. And I think I'm going to miss that part, and I probably don't realize now how much I'm going to miss it until it's over. But talking with people that have gone on before me and their experience with retirement, and you need to brace for this, you need to brace for that, is somebody that said something to me several weeks ago that really clicked, and it was this: is that when you've been in a department like this as long as you have, you built the relationships that you have, and then you make a conscious decision to withdraw from that. It is really very similar to a grieving process when you have a loss in the family and you go through a grieving process. And I'm like, well, that's kind of scary. Maybe I don't want to retire. It's like, but the more I thought about it, I think back to your question, what are you going to miss? And I think it's just maybe we take for granted the relationships. We come to work, we have fun, we joke. We roll up our sleeves, get through the hard times, whether it's the EOC, whether it's the fire headquarters. We push through, and we see wins, we high five. And I think as you step back from that, you'll probably look back and say, that was probably the best times of my career. And I'll probably end up missing the people, as much as anything else.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty confident in saying that the doors will always be open for you, Chief Elliott, if you ever want to come back. If anyone's earned themselves for retirement, though, it is certainly you. We're counting it at 50 years. All right,
okay,
we're going to say 50 years of service.
There you go.
Chief Elliott, thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
and for all of your time here with the City of Chesapeake.
Thank you so much.